Well, this morning our passage is from the book of Joshua, and we're going to jump to chapter 3, but in my message today, I'm going to be coming to chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4 as I tell the story of crossing the Jordan and having breakfast at Gilgal. So we'll begin with verse 7 in chapter 3. Listen now for what God has to say to the church with this reading of the word. The Lord said to Joshua, "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so that they may know I will be with you as I was with Moses. You are the one who shall command the priests, who shall bear the ark of the covenant. When you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." Joshua then said to the Israelites, "Draw near and hear the words of the Lord your God." Joshua said, "By this you shall know that among you is the living God, who without fail will drive out from before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. The ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is going to pass before you into the Jordan. So now select 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. When the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan flowing from above shall be cut off, and they'll stand in a single heap. When the people set out from their tents to cross over the Jordan, the priests bearing the ark of the covenant were in front of the people. Now the Jordan overflows all its banks during the time of harvest. So when those who bore the ark had come to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the edge of the waters flowing from above stood still, rising in a single heap far off at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan. While those flowing towards the sea of the Arabah, the Dead Sea, were wholly cut off. Then the people crossed over opposite Jericho. While all Israel were crossing over on dry land, the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan until the entire nation finished crossing over the Jordan. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. God of heaven and earth, God who brought your people across the Jordan, we pray that you, as you share your word with us this morning, that we think of our own Jordans that we have crossed and are to come. We think of the Jordans that face this church and the nation and the world, and we ask that you help us with your word to know that you are with us wherever we go. In Jesus' name, amen. My name is Sarah. I'm 42 years old. I live in what you all might call the Bronze Age. That's before the Iron Age. I was named after that Sarah. That Sarah, I mean Abraham's wife. Abraham and Sarah, they were the first couple that believed the promise. Abraham's the one that God took out to look at the stars in the sky and said, "You'll have descendants more than this, if you can even count them." And Sarah and Abraham, they're the ones that God said, "I'm going to lead you to a land, the land of promise, the land that's going to be your home or the home of your descendants. I'm not going to tell you how long that's going to take." My namesake, Sarah, who lived many, many years before me, she and Abraham believed the promise, and they went. And I always think of that whenever I am not sure what to do, that I'm named after Sarah. I was born a slave. I wasn't a slave very long, but my parents were. They were slaves in Egypt. They were slaves in Egypt when the work was really, really hard. You have no idea. You probably can't even imagine in the Bronze Age what it was like to make bricks, and to build things and to make materials for the roads that the Pharaoh wanted to build. Can you even imagine what that would have been like? We were all slaves. I was born in slavery, like Moses. But God raised up Moses to lead us. God had a plan. And so we were delivered out of slavery. I was in the arms of my mama or my daddy. I can't remember which one. God raised up Moses, and God convinced Moses that God was with him, and Moses led us with God's leading him out of slavery. You've probably heard, if you've read your Bible, about how the Red Sea parted. And you've probably heard about how all the chariots were consumed with water after we crossed over. You probably heard how we went out into the wilderness and how God was ahead of us in a pillar of fire, in a column. We always knew God was with us no matter what. I was too, but my parents remember, and my parents have told me so many stories about being in the wilderness. That's when I first learned about God's timing. You've heard of God's timing? Sometimes it's not ours, is it? It certainly wasn't ours. After we went across the sea and we got to the desert and we thought we were going straight on to the promised land, but no. So God's timing is kind of ziggy and zaggy, and things go better, and then there's the golden calf, which I guess you've heard about, that one of my cousins helped build. So seems like you're doing well, and it seems like you're on your way, and it seems like you're following God, and then all of a sudden it seems like God's a long way away and you've lost your way. And that's how it was with us for 40 years. 40 years we were in the wilderness. 40 years we were wandering around. It's not that far from Egypt to the land of promise. But it wasn't God's timing for us. We had lots to learn. We learned to be not only okay, but joyous with eating manna every day. Everyone learned to make it different ways. If it were now, maybe there'd be a church cookbook about all the different ways to make manna. But at that time, the women were proud of the different ways they made it, the different ways they made it taste. I remember my mama's manna. Well, Moses was getting kind of old, and God made a plan, and that plan was for Joshua to be raised up. So Joshua is from the tribe of Ephraim, and that's my tribe. So I know him a little better than some others. So Joshua is kind of like a distant cousin, a lot older than me. And if you want to know what he was like, I'll tell you. He was the kind of guy that never made a mistake. Have you met that kind? Sometimes they seem kind of arrogant, but Joshua was never arrogant. He was the most humble person in the world. You know, he never got married any time in the wilderness. He had stuff to do. He learned from Moses how to do things. He followed Moses where he went. Moses kept telling him, be brave, be courageous. God is with you. And that's what he would always say to us. Be brave. Be courageous. God is with us. I was kind of proud of being in the same tribe as Joshua. When Moses died, we were devastated. Maybe you've had a leader like that in your life, where it seemed like if something happened to him, how would you go on? And that's how we felt. He was so smart and so wise and so patient. And when he died, we mourned for days and days. Then Joshua came to us and said, the Lord's told me it's time. We're going to go. It's time. In 3 days, we're going to break camp. In 3 days, we're going to go to the edge of the Jordan River, the river that separates us from the land of promise. In 3 days, we're going to go. So get ready. And so we packed up all our things. You'd be amazed what you can accumulate in 40 years in the desert. We had like things to sleep on. We had things to wrap babies in. We had some tools. We had all the things that we needed. We had things that we dragged to take things from one place to the other. And so we packed up. Joshua also said, sanctify yourselves, meaning make yourselves ready because God's about to do wonders among you. And so I personally saw one of my other cousins throw away an idol, throw it in the bushes and leave it back there in the wilderness. We didn't want to take anything there that was unclean into the promised land. They sent spies over there, just a few, and the spies came back and said, those people of Jericho are scared of us, so let's go. So Joshua's brought us right up to the riverbank, and we camped there that night. We camped there right at the riverbank. Well, the river at that time of year, March, April-ish, is really, really wide. You know, the Jordan River is not really that wide, usually. But at that time of year, the snow is melting up in the mountains of Lebanon. It comes down through the Sea of Galilee, and it's rushing where we were. And when we saw it, we said, no way, how are we going to get across the river in a flood time? I mean, it was scary. It was like somebody threw in a twig and it went 40 miles an hour down the river. What was going to happen? We don't have time to make boats. We can't all swim in that current. Were we going to make rafts like Robinson Crusoe? Joshua said, be strong and courageous. God is with us. Just wait. They're going to take the Ark of the Covenant. That's the box that holds the 10 Commandments and a jar of manna. And it's carried on poles and it's covered with gold. They're going to take that, the priests, and they're going to step in the water and it's going to stop. But nobody, that's a little hard to believe, don't you think? Step in the water, it stops during the flood time. But Joshua was never wrong. Remember, that's the kind of guy he was. So that morning, 4 priests took the poles of the ark and they carried it down to the river. And when their feet went into the river, it stopped. It stopped. And all the way up a long way, you could see the water not going over the banks, but standing up in a big heap. And we took our things, and mamas took their babies. And some of the daddies were soldiers, and they protected us and kind of went on the side just in case the water came back. And we went across the water. And, I know Scripture says it was dry, but actually there was a lot of puddles and floppy fish and things to step on and places to turn your ankle because it had just stopped. We all went across, every one of them, and we saw God's power that day. We'd heard, most of us don't remember crossing over from Egypt. We'd heard about it. We'd never seen something like this ourselves. So when we saw it, we were overwhelmed with the power of God working among us. We all crossed, every single one of us. Not a person was left behind. Not a person was harmed. We all went across. That next morning, we had breakfast in a place called Gilgal, which means circle or wheel. And God had told Joshua to send one man from each tribe of the 12 tribes, one strong man, Joshua could pick them, to pick up a big rock out of the water that had gone aside and to put them in an arrangement, in a monument, for people to remember what had happened there. And so someone from my tribe went and someone from all the other tribes, and there was a beautiful monument created there at Gilgal. And that next morning when the sun came up, we had breakfast there, manna made our favorite ways, celebrating what God had done among us, where no one was left behind and all were safe in the land of promise. I got to go back and look at those stones a couple of times in the next year, and I was thinking about what they meant to me, because everyone had a little bit different take on what the stones made them remember. And for me, what I remembered was to remember that God's timing is perfect. No matter what it seems like, no matter how long it takes to find that special someone or finish that school or discover what purpose God has for your life next, or family troubles that never seem to end, or whatever it is, God's timing, God is at work and God's timing is perfect. And from those stones, I also remember that God has endless, infinite power. God has power over nature. God doesn't use it all the time. But God has power over nature. God has power over circumstances. God has power over those Jordan rivers that plague us, that worry us, that seem insurmountable, that have currents that could pull you along if you fell in, that you feel like you might die. God has power over all of that. God is the God of heaven and earth and all that are within it. And we have to trust that all the time. And then the third thing that those stones remind me, and I'll never forget, because two things happened that showed me this was the case. Those stones remind me that God doesn't want anyone to be left behind. The whole nation crossed over. No one was left behind. Every single person was completely precious to God. So I remember there were three teenage boys. I say teenage, they were like 11, so they were not quite. And they were going to race across the Jordan. And they decided this the night before, whether it was water they were going to swim or whether it was true that it was going to be dry, they were going to race. And the first one to the promised land, they found something and that one was going to get the prize. So these three 10-year-old boys, completely competitive, actually from three different tribes, that day, when the water stopped, they started running, and they were out ahead of everybody. They were running, and then one tripped on a rock and fell down. And the others kept running, and then they kind of looked back. And they saw their friend with a little blood on his knees, and they went back to get him. And he'd sprained his ankle, actually, and they carried him the rest of the way. And no, they didn't win. They were way behind. But I was so proud of them. And then there was an older woman who was having a hard time going across. I think her family thought she was going to meet the Lord over on the other side, that is, the side across from Jericho, back where we'd come from. But that wasn't the Lord's wish. And they carried her all the way across, kind of like carrying a baby. And she had breakfast with us that morning at Gilgal. And you know what? She lived about 10 more years. The stones mean to me, the stones of memory, that God's timing is perfect, that God is ever powerful, and that God never wants anyone to be left behind. And that was the message that Jesus later brought to everyone. Jesus, who made friends with the outsider, with those Canaanites that the Israelites went to conquer, that everyone was needed, that no one would be left behind, that everyone was precious, and gives us the ability to be that kind of people ourselves. After the supper today, after the service is over, if you'd like to take a rock from the table and take it with you, and I think there's enough for a few of you to take one to a friend, please do. And remember how God has been good to you and to us in your lifetime. And carry that rock for the Jordans to come. To God be the glory. Amen.